So, you want to be a great writer like Ernest Hemingway. You want to end up on bookshelves across the world and show your beautiful art to others. But what qualities do you need to make that happen? Well, today we are going to hear Hemingway speak at length on those qualities. And Right Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to Ernest Hemingway here on YouTube. If you look at the playlist down below, you will find many videos on Hemingway's life, his books, and his writing philosophy. And so I would love for you to come on this journey of creating a literary renaissance. But enough for me. Let us now hear from Hemingway. First, there must be talent, much talent. Talent such as Kipling had. Then there must be discipline, the discipline of Flaubert. Then there must be the conception of what it can be and an absolute conscience as unchanging as the standard meter in Paris to prevent faking. Then the writer must be intelligent and disinterested, and above all, he must survive. Try to get all these in one person and have him come through all the influences that press on a writer. The hardest thing, because time is so short, is for him to survive and get his work done. And for fun, here's the second one. There must be talent, much talent. This seems obvious, but it is often overlooked. Do you have a knack for telling stories? It took me a while to show my work to others because I was afraid I had zero talent. Show your work and listen to the feedback. Over the course of 2 years, I've received so much feedback, and luckily most of it has been positive. However, the critiques I can learn from, and so can you. Writing is a craft. Talent can be improved, but yes, there has to be something there already to begin with. And this is, an unfortunate thing that I hate to talk about, but here on Right Conscious, I tell you the truth that at some level, talent is going to be the determining factor if you reach that status of being a legend. Because anybody, no matter how good or bad of a writer they are, have the opportunity to have hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, read their work during their lifetime because of the internet now. You don't need to be this uber talented person. But unfortunately, if you want to step into the arena and be the next level, then you are competing with people, for instance, like Cormac McCarthy, whose father was the valedictorian of Yale Law School. You're competing with David Foster Wallace, whose parents were both professors and trained him to be a writer from day one. Plenty of the authors behind me were trained to be writers their entire life. Or later on, they had access, for instance, like Hemingway, to a group of writers like Ezra Pound, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and so many other goats who could elevate them and help them. Many of us are just wandering interlopers, derelicts, pilgrims out in this world, and we are improving our writing, but we don't have the staples that made the people before us great. And I personally think that those things cultivate talent, that if you're in a good environment, then it's much easier to break through. But as the famous quote goes, talent or hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I've known plenty of talented writers. Almost every single talented writer I have known have quit. And I know other writers who I would say had little to no talent who are now full-time authors. And so this doesn't necessarily matter, but I think it only matters in the question of becoming canonical. Because Hemingway says down here that time is so short. And because it's sadly, seemingly our economy, I feel like it's a little bit harder to just kind of make it by. And I know that's excuses a lot of the time because I actually floated for years working random jobs that were really easy. And if you set your heart out to finding those, you can get those. But when I read these biographies of writers and how they were basically just able to live, and I know the conditions weren't great, but they were able to make a little bit of money and sustain for a super long time. Guys like Cormac McCarthy, even in the 1960s, able to not work a job for a decade on almost no money. It's almost not possible to be able to do that anymore. At least not in the United States. Maybe if you move to if you have a pile of cash you save up and move to India or a Southeastern Asian country, you can make that happen. Which is always the fantasy of all these incels. I have these incels who, and I hate to call them that, but that's what they are. They are like anti-capitalist, they're anti-women, they don't believe that you should monetize your writing at all. And they're like, I'm working right now and I'm going to move to Southeast Asia and live for 10 years and just write. And if you look at Hemingway's career, when he was 26 years old, he published In Our Time. And in 1940, he published For Whom the Bell Tolls. And there was a 15-year period where he was writing his best work. And this is actually the case for many different authors. You know, when you look at Cormac McCarthy's career or others, you see kind of this peak. And even if they continue to write after or Faulkner, your time is limited and you can never tell when it's going to be, which is kind of crazy, right? That some authors peak in their 60s and are grinding, but other authors are peaking in their 20s and early 30s. And so you don't ever know when your time is going to be. And I think that is one of the reasons why we should be writing a ton and publishing and taking all of this very seriously. Because what if 20 years from now you look back and you wasted 10 years and maybe you got one book done, but you were working these meaningless jobs and doing all this stuff and wasting this time? But that was it. That was your moment. And you only have this one thing from it. When in actuality, you could have had a whole library of stuff published from that period. And writers dying from poor health, from suicide, or having their soul die, having them quitting, you know, that's what Hemingway's also saying here, like surviving. Like he knows, obviously, because he lost the fight, of how hard it is to be a writer and keep it up. And he was writing in an era where you could become a writer, that there were like multiple types of commissions for writing because people were still buying books in mass. And they still are today, but just not in the same, maybe more elevated genres as they once were. And so, of course, he talks about Flaubert. And I don't know if you guys know about Flaubert, but he basically had a monastic discipline. He was the OG incel. He lived with his mom. He had no job. He didn't teach. They had no distractions. And he would lock himself away and just write the same passages a bunch of times. And he believed in forging style, not this idea that style just kind of comes to you. Which, as I look at the authors behind me, that's what I see when I look at their drafts and what they did. It was these authors' obsessions that made them great. Cormac McCarthy was not a master, but proficient in mathematics and in science, especially for a layman who didn't go get degrees in them, especially for someone from a time where that information wasn't readily accessed. And so he brought that mind to his writing. He brought that mechanical, objective, cold mind to producing the beautiful sentences that we know him for. And plenty of other authors are the same way. We think that people need to be these airy-fairy writers, but that's really poets. Fiction writers, in actuality, if you're trying to be a part of the conversation of being great, it requires you to have that precision, that conscience, as he says, that's unchanging, that isn't faking, that really drives you forward to continue showing the world your vision. And so this is it, everyone. This is the path that you are going to have to take as an author. If you want to be great, you're going to have to figure out your own version of these things. And every single one you leave behind is lessening your chance of becoming great. And you don't need to be great. A literary renaissance requires countless people who are going to be stepping stones, who are going to be important to help those people who are going to sacrifice and make this journey. Because imagine this. Think of a book launch like Twilight or Harry Potter, where people are lining up at every single bookstore across the country. I don't know the last time that happened for a piece of literary fiction. I don't know. I don't think it's happened in this century, but it could happen. And why doesn't it happen? Well, one of the reasons is that there are not enough readers out there who've been awakened. There are, as I say, these Manchurian candidates, these sleepers who can read literary fiction, who want to, who occasionally do, but they're not active in the game. They've lost trust in modern books, or they've become lost in other pursuits in life, whatever. And so our job on the ground, maybe as authors who aren't the best, who aren't going to be the GOATs, are getting those people interested in reading again. And if 50,000 authors all get a couple hundred people to awaken, then that's alone 25 million new readers on top of all the other readers. And when you have those numbers, suddenly you could do those Twilight or Harry Potter type launches. And so you are important. And if you're just a reader who is listening to this, then you are important. You choose who to support. You can choose to spend your time on BS or by just helping other authors for free. Reading someone's post on Substack and hitting the like button and saying that was awesome does more for their career than you could ever imagine. That's so important. And so this is the Monday word. This is how you get good at writing. You're going to need some talent. You're going to need some discipline. You're going to have some consistency. And most of all, you're going to have a vision that you are willing to carry through no matter what, even at the peril of death. And so, thank you guys for being here. If you guys would like to join my book club, get access to more videos over on my Substack, I would love to see each and every one of you guys over there. I will put the link to that down in the description below, alongside some other stuff related to Ernest Hemingway. And I will see you guys very soon in the next video.